Hello, we will be starting chapter 2 today. So again, there are some videos that you can watch as extra resources if you need help with anything that I talk about in this chapter. There's also some extra practice that I found online that might be helpful. So give them a try if you feel like any concept is not making sense. The first thing we want to learn, when you hear about a programming language, you always hear about Hello World, the Hello World program. So what the Hello World program does is just print a message that says Hello World. So we want to be able to do that in Python. So Python has something called the print function. And when I talk about function, we're going to talk more about functions in the future. But function means something that has a function. It has a job to do. So Python has a print function, and the function of this print function is to display some output to the screen. So I'm going to go to mu, and I'm going to type print, and in parentheses, I'm going to say hello world. And notice that around hello world, I put quotes. I put single quotes. Now I want to run this to make sure it's correct. I click on the run, and it runs at the bottom. If I change this to have a smiley face after it, and click on stop, run again, it's printing the message. So what is the print function doing? It is printing whatever I give it inside the parentheses. Now, what if I made a mistake? Let's say I forget to put this parenthesis at the end. So let's go back to just hello world, and I forgot to close the parenthesis. So the print function, you start with a parenthesis at the beginning, and you should have one at the end. What if I forget that? Well, the program doesn't run. So this is called a syntax error. So when I talked about in chapter 1, we talked about something called a syntax error. This is a syntax error. Here I forgot the parenthesis. Okay. So the right way to do it is saying print, and in parentheses put hello world inside quotes. Well, what if I forget to put a quote? Okay, let's forget to put the quote, for example. Well, that will also give me a syntax error. So this one will also give me a syntax error. So these are syntax error scenarios. Here I forgot the quote. And the reason I'm writing all these comments here is that I will be uploading this file to Blackboard so that you can have it as a reference later to look at. So the right way to do printing is in parentheses, we say hello world, we put it inside quotes, we make sure we put our beginning parenthesis and our ending parenthesis. Okay, now I will show you a few things, and I will not go in the same order as the slides, but I will make sure that I cover everything in the slides. Now, one thing about strings is that you can have single quotes or you can use double quotes. So if I say hello world, let's say call it 2, inside double quotes, that'll work too. So you can use single quotes or double quotes. Now you can't mix them. So I can't use a double quote here and a single quote here. That's not going to work. So if I start with a double quote, I have to end with a double quote. If I start with a single quote, I have to end with a single quote. The nice thing also is that it allows 3 single quotes. Why would we ever need to use the 3 single quotes? So that works too. So imagine I want to print hello, and I want to print someone's name, Cat, for example. Well, if I'm starting my print statement with a single quote and ending it with a single quote, I can use double quotes inside. So that'll work. Now imagine if I had single quotes, imagine if I had double quotes around my full string. This is going to be confusing because now the interpreter in Python doesn't know when it hits this quote. It doesn't know whether this quote should be closing hello or I actually want it to be part of the printing. And so it's not going to work. If you are looking at the colors here, hello is in red, but cat is in black. And if you look at the colors on your computer too when you're typing it, you'll notice that. So the nice thing about Python is that it allows us to use these different kinds of quotes so that we can use the other quote inside. So if I want to have a double quote in my string, I need to wrap it with a single quote. I want to use a single quote in my string, then I make sure that I wrap it with a double quote. So here I wrapped it with a double quote so I can use a single quote inside and it's getting printed. And if for some reason I want to be using both double quotes and single quotes, I can do that, and I will just wrap my string with 3 single quotes. So this is just a convenient way to print some things. So what we've been doing so far is printing strings. So these are all strings. They're called strings. Now we can also print some numbers. So for example, I can print 10. Or I can print, 9.8. Notice that when I'm printing numbers, we do not put them in quotes. So when you print numbers, no quotes used. With strings, we have to use quotes. So we have to use single or double or triple single quotes. Okay. So single quotes or double quotes or triple single quotes. So I can print strings and I can print numbers. The next thing I want to show you is that Python has types, has something called data types. So I said here string, I said string. Here I said a number. Well, this number is a little bit different from this number. This number is a whole number. It doesn't have any decimal, it doesn't have a point something in it. This number is a decimal number. We call it in Python a floating point number because it has this point in it, this decimal in it. And the nice thing about Python is that if you have something, it can tell you the type. And types, we're going to get introduced to them right now, but we're going to really learn about them later. So for now, just know that everything in Python has a type. Now, how can I know the type of something? So just like there's a print function that prints whatever I give it in parentheses, there's a type function. And the type function gives us the type. So if I say I want the type of hello, well, here, if I just do that, I'm not going to get anything. So what I want to do is I want to actually print the type. So I want to get the type, and to see it, I want to print it. So I'm going to wrap all that with a print. So I want to print the type of hello. So I go to the type function, I say, get me the type of hello, and when it gives it back to me, I'm going to print that. And so I get that the print, the type is a string. str stands for string. Let's try getting the type of 10. And while we're at it, let's get the type of also 9.8. And so now it tells me that 10 is an int, and it tells me that 9.8 is a float. Okay, so int is kind of like a whole number, and this one is str, which stands for string. So let's go to the slides and look at a few notes. Now, I just want you to notice that here in the print function, we put parentheses around whatever we're printing. In Python 2.x, we're using version 3 point something. In version 2, they used to use the print without parentheses. So if you see anyone that is doing code where they're printing something like print, hello, like that, this was Python 2.x syntax. Okay, so now here, what we just printed were things called constants. So no matter how many times I run this program, I will always get the same thing printed. I will always get hello world 2, hello world 3, and so on. So these are called constants. They are constant. They are not changing. What is the opposite of a constant? Something that is a variable, something that changes. And so we can create variables. So for example, I can say, I want the message to get printed, that's going to get printed is welcome to Python, for for example. Okay, and so now when I print, I can say print the message. Now notice here, message does not have any quotes around it. Here, what I am doing is I am creating a variable called message and storing a constant welcome to Python in it. And so when we print the message, it's going to print welcome to Python, which is there. So when we print, variables do not put quotes around the variable name. And as you're watching this video, I want you to try all these yourself so that you get into the habit of typing them and you memorize these commands. So 10, 9.8, hello dog, all these are constant. No matter how many times I run this program, they will always produce the same thing. Here, what I did was I created a variable, and this variable is storing a message in it. And this message can change. Like right now, it's welcome to Python. Maybe I want to change it to welcome to class. So now what's going to get stored in the variable is a different message. Okay, and it's going to reflect when I ask it. So what I just did here was I went to RAM and I requested space that is big enough to store this welcome to class message, okay, or welcome to Python message. And I said RAM, label this space message so that I can refer to it later. So what this is doing is requesting space from RAM and store and naming the space message and storing, you know, whatever I put in there. Welcome to Python. You know. Okay. So there are two things in Python. There are strings. There are constants that we just use in our code, and then there are variables that we can use to store information. Now we talked about the types briefly. Let's look at a little bit more details. So data types in Python are the types of the information, the constants or the variables that we're storing. Why do we need types? They will come in handy later, as we will see in later chapters. But basically, the type of the data affects the RAM space. For now, I just want you to know that we have integer and float, which are used for whole numbers and decimal numbers, and we have strings. The rest of them we will talk about when the time comes during the course. So here I created a variable called age and I set it equal to 29. Well, 29, if you look at it, it has no quotes around it, so it's not a string. It doesn't have a decimal number, so it's a whole number, so it's an int. So if I try to print the type of it, I will get that it's an int. If I now set age to 29.0 and try to get the type of it, I will get that it's a float. Now, if I put 29 in double quotes, then it will be a string. So let's try that activity together, that exercise together. Here, I'm going to say age is equal to 29. And then I'm going to say print me the type of age. So here I'm requesting the type of the variable age. And again, notice I don't put any quotes around age. And then I'm going to print that. And I will get that it's an int. Okay, so that gives me that it's an int back. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this. But now I'm going to change it a little. So I'm going to make it 29.0. And this time I'm going to make it 29 in quotes. And let's see what each one of these prints out. So the first one printed that it's an int. The second one, the 29.0, printed that it's a float. And the last one printed that it is a string. Okay, so these are the types. Here I'm creating a variable that has different types. And each time when it's going to RAM, actually it's taking different amounts of spaces. So ints take less space in RAM than 29.0 than floats. We talked about using single quotes and double quotes and triple single quotes already. We talked about creating variables. The nice thing about variables is that you can reassign them. So if you notice here, I created a variable age. I set it to 29, which is an int, and then later I changed it to 29.0, and then later I changed it again to a string. Okay. So you can change when you create variables, you can reassign them. You can change them. So if you have a student, for example, or I have someone who got a grade and their grade was a C, and later they fixed their grade and they did some extra credit, I can change the grade to a B, and later I can change it to be an A. So you can reassign variables. You can reassign variables to other values that are of the same type, or you can even change the type totally. So here I can say, well, I want grade now to be 78 or 96. So here I'm changing the type. Here I was changing the value. Here I'm actually even changing the type. So you can do reassignment of variables. And we will, again, see how variables are useful in the future. Now, when you're creating those variables, you need to think of meaningful names, good names. So how do we name them? What are the rules? So the first thing is that they need to start with a letter or an underscore. So that means they cannot start with a number. The name can consist of letters, numbers, underscores. It cannot start with a number. It cannot contain a space, and it cannot be some word that has some specific meaning in Python. Okay, and names are case sensitive. So let's try good names and bad names. So here, if I say my grade equal to A, this is a bad. Why is it a bad name? Because it contains a space. So if I was to try this, I will get a syntax error. See, it doesn't like it. So it's invalid syntax. Something is wrong. So this is a bad name. Okay. Another bad name is, for example, 3 grade. And even now you notice it's already in blue for some reason. It doesn't like it. So if I say this is my name, again, it's not going to like that. It's going to complain that it's an invalid syntax. So this is also a bad name because it starts with a number. But I can say things like, grade 1 equal to 10, grade underscore 2 equal to 90. So these are good names. Okay, so as long as they start, oops, we need to comment that line out. So as long as they start with a letter or even an underscore, let's say grade, say 3, for example. All these will be nice names. So here it didn't complain, it accepted it. So if you look at this slide, if you look at this code, it's real. This is really hard code. You might have a typo. You might not notice this is a 0 or an O. So this is bad code. These are bad variable names. You should not use variable names like that. Now, I wrote the code now with easier variable names. A is 35, B is 12.5, C is A times B, and I want you to print C. So these two pieces of code will do the same thing. Now, this code will run. However, I really don't know what A, B, and C stand for. Now here, if I choose the names like hours, this person worked 35 hours, their rate is 12.5, their pay is hours times rate. So now I can look at this code and I can understand what this code is doing. So when we're using variable names, we want to pick variable names that are meaningful. Now also, variable names are case sensitive. So here, if I say age is 29, or let's do it. Let's say age is 10 and age is 20. Now, if I print age and print age, these are two different variables. Sorry, uppercase A. So I created two different variables, and they are actually two different variables here. So variable names are case sensitive. It's good practice to just have variable names always start with a lowercase letter just to make things easier. So if we look at these variable names, density, that's a good name. Area, it's a good name, valid name. X underscore sum, valid. F parentheses X, that is not a valid name because parentheses have a special meaning in Python. We use them around the print, what we're printing or what we're asking the type of. So parentheses are not valid in variable names. M over S, that's not allowed because that special symbol is used for division. X $Y, so we said only variable, only letters, underscore, and numbers. F2 is accepted. 2 asterisks is not going to be accepted because 2 asterisks have a special meaning in Python, which we're going to find about soon. And final underscore value is also a valid name. Now, the next thing we want to do, we learned how to print a variable and print a constant value. What if I want to print a mix and match of them? Well, we can do that. The print method takes multiple arguments. So inside the parentheses, I can give it multiple arguments, and I just have to put commas between them. So here I have age, which is a string, 29, and I have a name, Bob, and what I want to print is, the name is something years old. Name, the name of the person I want to print is a variable. So I want here to print Bob. So I'll put the variable name, and notice no quotes around it. Then I put comma, and then I want to print the word is, so I'll put is in quotes. Then I want to print whatever their age is, so I put that variable without quotes, and then I want to print the word years old. So name is a variable, is a constant, age is a variable, years old is a constant. So let's try that. Okay. Your name is Cat, and age, let's just use 10. I want to print my name. So my cat is age and then years old. And notice here I didn't put any spaces. And when I print this, it actually shows up with spaces. So what the print method does, it adds a space. So the print function adds a space between each argument. So these are called arguments. I passed it several arguments. I passed it 1 argument, 2 arguments, 3, 4, 5. I passed it 5 arguments, and it printed each argument followed by a space. It separated them with a space. So this comma actually got kind of translated into a space. So what happens if I actually did put spaces in there? So if I put a space here, you will notice extra spaces showing up. So now I have my, which has 2 spaces between them. So when you're using the print function, just make sure you don't, and you're using the comma here to separate them, don't put any spaces. Okay. So this is all we're going to cover for this part of chapter 2. We'll cover the rest of chapter 2 in the next slide. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to do the classwork for this chapter, for this classwork.